In December 1968, on an isolated gravel road in Northern California, two teenagers parked their car for the night. They were met by a sudden sweep of headlights, followed immediately by unprovoked rapid gunfire. During this era, criminal psychology suggested a standard profile for this type of offender, a predator who operated in absolute secrecy, desperate to cover their tracks and avoid law enforcement at all costs. But roughly 6 months later, following a second attack, a dispatcher at the Vallejo Police Department answered the phone. On the other end was a calm, monotone, almost robotic voice explicitly taking credit for both sets of murders and detailing the exact weapons used. The phone call signaled a shift in the killer's strategy, pulling the investigation out of the shadows and into a public, psychological hostage situation. The attacks soon escalated from midnight ambushes to a brazen assault in broad daylight. In September 1969, a young couple was relaxing on an island at Lake Berryessa, a popular and scenic public recreation area. They were approached by a man in a highly specific theatrical outfit, a heavy black executioner's hood extending to his shoulders, dark sunglasses covering square eye holes, and a large, hand-stitched white cross and circle symbol on his chest. Using a remarkably calm demeanor, the man claimed to be an escaped convict needing their car and money to flee to Mexico. He used this fabricated story to lull the couple into a false sense of security, convincing them to let themselves be tied up before he drew a 12-inch hunting knife and attacked them. Moving from unseen gunfire in the dark to a daylight stabbing in a custom-made costume revealed a clear shift in intent. The killer was actively designing a recognizable villain persona, aiming to terrify the public through highly orchestrated performances. He expanded his audience by mailing letters to 3 major San Francisco newspapers, demanding they print his coded messages on their front pages. If they refused, he threatened to embark on a weekend killing spree. While federal intelligence agencies and the FBI struggled to find a pattern in the Z408 cipher using standard cryptanalysis, a local school teacher and his wife broke the code from their living room. They bypassed traditional decoders by correctly guessing that the killer's ego would lead him to repeat words like "I" and "kill." This diagram shows a subsequent code mailed in November 1969. Known as the Z340 cipher, this dense grid of abstract symbols stumped the FBI and the world's top cryptanalysts for 51 years. The grid's extreme difficulty relied on a technique called transposition. The author didn't just substitute letters, he scrambled the reading path itself. To decode it, you had to move diagonally, down 1 row and over 2 columns, a pattern finally broken by an international team using custom software in 2020. The psychological manipulation extended beyond codes. In one widely publicized letter, he outlined a plan to shoot out the tires of San Francisco school buses and execute the children as they stepped outside, forcing armed police escorts to follow local bus routes for weeks. The killer successfully co-opted the media apparatus, turning the Daily News into a platform for broadcasting his terror across the entire nation. The nationwide panic peaked in October 1969 after the killer shot a taxi driver in the wealthy San Francisco neighborhood of Presidio Heights. Witnesses called in a description, but a critical dispatch error mistakenly identified the suspect over the police radio as a black male. Because of that single miscommunication, 2 patrolling officers unknowingly drove right past a heavy-set white man walking away from the crime scene, losing their best chance to apprehend him. Despite missing him that night, police eventually focused on a prime suspect named Arthur Lee Allen. The circumstantial evidence was staggering. His shoe size matched the crime scene prints, a survivor identified his voice, he owned the exact same .22 caliber ammunition used in the first attack, and he wore a watch manufactured by a brand called Zodiac, featuring the same cross-circle logo. But tracking suspects like Allen was severely hindered by the administrative structure of the era. With no centralized digital database, 4 different county police departments were running entirely separate investigations, often taking weeks to share crucial suspect lists across jurisdictions. When investigators finally tried to pin the crimes on Allen, the physical science of the 1960s provided an immovable roadblock. Partial DNA extracted from the saliva on the mailed envelopes, along with crime scene fingerprints and handwriting samples, completely failed to match him. The inability to close the case highlights a massive systemic failure. The killer operated successfully inside the deep administrative blind spots between uncoordinated police jurisdictions and outpaced the limits of primitive forensic science. After a final confirmed letter in 1974, the communications abruptly stopped. Investigators are left with three main theories. The killer died of unrecorded natural causes, he was incarcerated for an entirely separate, unrelated crime, or he simply stopped hunting and faded into a quiet suburban retirement. Behind the sprawling, decades-long investigation is a stark human reality. David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, and Paul Stein were real people whose lives and futures were violently erased to fuel an attention-seeking stunt. Thousands of suspects have been reviewed, and entire communities of independent codebreakers have spent their lives analyzing the case files, yet the actual identity of the man behind these attacks remains entirely unconfirmed. By weaponizing complex codes and public fear, the perpetrator successfully traded the lives of innocent people for a permanent place in true crime history, manufacturing an urban legend that remains unsolved over 50 years later.